NSU University School presidential debate. I'm your host, Michael Weinbaum.
And I'm Amanda Kopelman. In recent presidential debates, we have been disappointed that the candidates seem to spend more time attacking each other than actually addressing the facts of the issues.
Today we will have 4 debates on different topics, such as tax plans, immigration, free trade, and America's support of NATO.
Each debate will feature 2-minute speeches, followed by 2 one-minute responses to direct questioning from me, and ending with a 30-second summarization of each side's argument. During the debate, we will have 2 bipartisan fact-checkers, Mr. Kane and Mr. Sobel. Mr. Sobel, can you tell us a little bit about your role and why it's so important?
Debate is about facts. At its core, a search for the truth. We believe officials should be elected because of their stances, not how bad the other candidate is. So don't make the debate personal and stick to the topics, like a real debate. Thank you. Amanda, back to you.
Thank you. We've all seen that politicians like to speak. In order to keep our debate going, Mr. Stern will be keeping time. Debaters, you will hear 1 gavel tap when you have a minute left to speak, 2 gavel taps at 30 seconds, and you will hear 3 taps when you need to finish.
Our first debate will be between Mr. Hurwitz and Mr. Bernstein. They will be discussing which system of taxation would be most beneficial to the United States. Josh will be speaking first in defense of a progressive style tax reform. Henry Hurwitz will be defending a flat tax. Josh, you have the floor.
When it comes to tax, the one that helps the economy, the poor, the middle class, and decreases the unemployment rate is progressive tax. With progressive tax, the poor doesn't have to pay as much money as someone else. But with a flat tax, someone who's making $30,000 a year and another person who may be making $900,000 a year would be paying the same amount in tax. This is obviously not fair, because if you are richer, you can afford to pay more, which is why you should. But progressive tax would also help people who are poor to get jobs. If people who were poor didn't have as much money, didn't have to pay as much in taxes, they can focus their money on things to help them get a job, like education. Most jobs need a person who has an education, as we see from BOS on 2016, which stated that 27% of jobs require less than a high school graduation. This means that most jobs require a better education, such as a college education. This is why when people don't have to pay as much as taxes and they can get an education that is better than a high school graduation, they can get a better job. And then they can generate more money and put it back into the economy. But with a flat tax rate, people who are poor have to pay a lot of money in taxes, which doesn't let them use their money for an education, which again, would not allow them to get a job as easily. Because progressive tax would allow for a better economy and decrease the unemployment rate, you should obviously prefer progressive tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Mr. Hurwitz, you have the floor.
I believe very strongly that a flat tax is the best for our economy. It will cut taxes for almost everyone and simplify our tax code. By cutting everyone's taxes, money will be freed up for business owners to invest. With this money, the businesses can create more jobs. Rick Perry, former governor of Texas, believes a flat tax will unleash economic growth. It will not only give families more money to spend, but it provides employers strong incentives to grow and create millions of jobs. Today, America's corporate tax rate is the second highest in the developed world, and it is riddled with loopholes that allow the biggest corporate companies with the best lawyers to avoid paying any taxes. With a very simple tax, there won't be loopholes for large companies to wiggle out of. There is no escaping a flat tax, and if it is put in place, everyone will have to pay. Mary Kate Carey, former White House speechwriter, says it's time to revamp our tax code in a way that spurs foreign investments, job creation, and economic growth. The flat tax would fuel all 3, in large part because it would end double taxation on savings and investments. A flat tax would create jobs that will help the poor in the long run. Also, large corporations will have to pay taxes because there will not be any loopholes for them to find. There is no way to get out of them. Not only will this close loopholes found by big corporations, but it will actually help our economy, because when these big corporations pay their taxes for the first time, it will go to the government and later help our economy.
Mr. Bernstein. One of Mr. Hurwitz's concerns in his speech was that progressive taxes would unfairly burden the wealthy and lead to less job creation. Can you please address this concern?
Well, although progressive tax may lead to the wealthy not having as much money, the poor would, and when they have more money, they can spend it on things to help them get a job easier, such as education. But with a flat tax, the poor have to pay more money in taxes, which doesn't allow them to use their money to get an education to get a job easier. So, although the wealthy may not have as much money, the middle class would obviously go up because people who are poor would have more money and get a job, which would increase how much money they generate a year, and then they could be able to put more money back into the economy. So, when the middle class goes up, so does the economy. And I think that Mr. Hurwitz and I can agree that this is what the goal is for our country. This is why you should prefer a progressive tax.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Mr. Hurwitz, one of Mr. Bernstein's chief concerns is the effect flat taxes have on the poor. Can you address that, Mr. Hurwitz?
Mr. Bernstein, I understand that you're saying a progressive tax will help the poor, but I couldn't disagree more. I strongly disagree because I'm really suggesting a modified flat tax. People making under $12,500 a year will have to pay no tax at all, but everyone else will have to pay a flat tax of 15%. This policy will help the poor because large corporations will have the money to invest in job creation and open more jobs. In addition, many companies will not relocate to different countries. Not only will this help the poor, but will help our economy as a whole. This will also encourage American businesses who had moved overseas to come back to the United States because we will then have one of the lowest corporate tax rates. This in turn will be an engine of job creation that will help the poor.
Thank you, gentlemen. Your 30-second speech, please, Mr. Bernstein.
With the progressive tax, people who are poor can have more money and can spend it on an education which will help them get a job easier. We know this because we can look back at the article from BLS, which told us that 27% of jobs require less than a high school education. This means that that most jobs require higher than a high school education, and most require a college education. But this means that people who are poor can get a better education and go to college, which is what most jobs require. We also see that when people who are poor get jobs and generate a steady income, they aren't poor anymore and put money into the government, which helps the economy. Then they also become part of the middle class. This is why progressive tax is essential.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Your 30-second speech now, Mr. Hurwitz.
I believe that a flat tax is the best thing for our economy and for the people as a whole. A flat tax will create jobs and encourage companies not to relocate, specifically because job creators won't have to suffer under America's unreasonably high corporate tax rates. My position is that when those with the ability to create jobs don't face financial hardship for starting new businesses, then jobs will be created and those jobs will benefit everyone. Bottom line, the flat tax helps everyone, the poor, the middle class, the upper class, and corporate America. And the flat tax will strengthen our economy by encouraging investments and creating more jobs for everyone.
Thank you both. Our second debate is between Ms. Ronkin and Mr. Robertson concerning America's immigration policy. Ms. Ronkin will be speaking first in favor of making America's immigration policy stricter.
When it comes to immigration, we have to clarify the logistics of our immigration policies. First, they have to become stricter. We focus on terrorism, but the presidential candidates don't realize without making them strict or too strict, as for Donald Trump, we're making no difference. Hillary Clinton talks about our current immigration policies, but we continue to have terrorist attacks. Pew Research Center states by a 17-point margin, 53% to 36%, more Republicans now say that the priority should be on better border security than a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. We want to make sure that our land as immigrants does not get too far, and we let people in who will harm our country. While I don't believe building walls is beneficial because it's going too far and will create more threats, making immigration laws stricter is beneficial for the United States. CNS News on June 4, 2010 states only 26% of Americans said that they prefer the integration of illegal immigrants, while 66% that they want the laws to be heavily enforced. Standing as a Republican, we should be able to provide what the citizens want. By standing with the Democratic Party, we're not representing what the citizens want, but a president should represent the people. Stricter laws will allow us to know who and what is coming into our country and what their background is. We should have stricter background checks that allow us to know that we're safe and that we're safe around us. For these reasons, we have to make stricter laws so continually we'll have less terrorism and more allies, not enemies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ronkin. Mr. Robertson will now speak for 2 minutes in favor of loosening America's immigration policy.
Our nation is founded on immigration. Even those of the lightest to darkest complexions started in this nation as immigrants looking for a better life. Many of the values that unite Americans as a nation are tied to immigration. Immigration has not only framed our vision of the U.S. role in the world, but has seeped into our view of human nature. According to NBC News, Hillary Clinton says, "I think it's important that we move to our comprehensive immigration reform, but at the same time stop the raids, stop the roundups, stop the deportation of people who are living here doing their lives, doing their jobs, and that's my priority. Without immigrants, we would lose so many workers that are great at what they do. I do know that more jobs would be opened up, but some immigrants are better at a particular job than Americans are. I understand that being a president, you have to represent the people, but you can only listen to people's ideas to some extent before it becomes a matter you have to take into your own hands. American citizens don't want to allow immigrants into our country, but don't realize that our country revolves around immigrants and our country's main focus is freedom. Our country was discovered by an immigrant. By keeping immigrants out, we are not focusing on what we believe. Hillary Clinton has pledged to pursue legislation creating a path to citizenship for qualifying immigrants in her first 100 days in office. Trump really is talking about sealing off the country, closing off the border, and throwing out the key. Entitlement. Trump has said he would deport young, undocumented immigrants without hesitation. For all the parents out there, imagine this. You and your children have come to America and your children are doing amazing in school, sports, etc. Then one day, you're deported back to your old country, having to adapt to their way of life and start over again. Is that fair to you? Our country stands by equality, but in doing that, these immigrants aren't equal to Americans. Thank you.
Mr. Robertson, in an era of widespread terror attacks, is it wise to open the doors even wider to potential terrorists?
I don't think it is wise to open the doors to potential terrorists, but I do think it is wise to open the doors to immigrants. Not allowing immigrants into our country could fuel terrorism. Terrorists terrorize the U.S. because they feel something isn't fair to them. Tightening our immigration policies would be one of the reasons they want to harm us and lead to more terrorism in our country. Immigration is the action of coming to live permanently in a foreign country. That means that terrorists can still attack us because more likely than not, they're not immigrants coming to America to settle down and live here. They're coming to America to cause harm to our country, and whatever we do, they will always find a way around it.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Ms. Ronkin, in your speech, you spoke in favor of limiting immigrants to this country. Do you think that it is in keeping with America's history as a nation of immigrants?
I agree that we are a nation founded on immigrants, but I strongly disagree that we should continue to let everyone into this country. With generations building and populations increasing, we are still a nation about culture and identity. That culture of those immigrants are coming through new generations along with immigrants still coming, but we're allowing our country to be safe with stricter laws. We should be a place where we aren't scared from the next ISIS threat, along with terrorists coming in. I'm saying that we need stricter laws so that the citizens get what they want, as well along with us knowing we're safe and knowing who comes into the United States of America. This ensures us and the citizens that we stay a country of liberty and protection. Thank you.
Thank you both. Your 30-second speech now, Ms. Ronkin.
As stated in my past speeches, we need stricter laws to stop terrorism. Though I see where Mr. Robertson is coming from, that we are a nation of immigrants, we should be a nation of protection as well. This does not stop immigrants from coming, but lets us know who's coming in. Our role of a president is to serve the people, and without making laws stricter, we're not serving the people. Terrorism is one of our biggest problems, and without making these laws stricter, nothing is going to change.
Thank you, Ms. Ronkin. Your 30-second speech time is now, Mr. Robertson.
Welcoming new immigrants into our country will inject valuable skills into the U.S. economy and enable American culture to maintain the rich diversity that appeals to consumers all around the world. Renewing the United States' long tradition of offering opportunity and refuge for immigrants will earn the United States respect and admiration from people throughout the world. Immigrants will take advantage of their ties to their native countries to open up new export markets for American products. And seeing all the benefits America will have by allowing immigrants into our country, I feel that immigration policies should be opened up.
Thank you both. Our third debate will be between Ms. Pareda and Mr. Gopkin. Their question is, are the TPP and other free trade agreements in America's best interest?
Ms. Pareda will speak first in favor of free trade. You have the floor.
The U.S. is a country that is involved with the international community. Therefore, being further involved with free trade agreements would only benefit our country for the better. According to the International Trade Administration, the USA is currently signed with 14 free trade agreements that is in force with over 20 countries. Considering that we are signed with countries that are known for their outstanding economy and trade, we must rely on them to ensure that our economy is able to thrive. Lucky for us, it has. The United States International Trade Commission elaborates on this by saying that U.S. exports will increase by $57.2 billion by 2032, and increase our country's overall income by $57.3 billion over that same period of time. Free trade agreements are helping us increase our economic value, but they also help us to receive products that we can't make and ship them to other countries in return. Forbes recently wrote an article talking about exactly how much money we are exporting in goods and receiving. Last year, the U.S. sold $1.5 trillion worth of American goods abroad and imported $2.25 trillion from other countries. Numbers like these is what makes our economy have the highest GDP in the world. Not only do free trade agreements help with bettering our economy and receiving goods, but it also has an effect on our environment. Many people only are able to see the negative impact, but there are many positives. This gives scientists an incentive to invent more economic and environmental friendly ways to trade. But they really don't need to be doing this, because according to the Foundation for Economic Education, there's little historical evidence of polluting industries migrating to countries. So why are people making such a big deal out of it? This presidential election is what our country is riding on. So by siding with free trade agreements, we are one step closer to helping both our environment and economy.
Thank you, Ms. Pareda. Mr. Gotkin will speak in opposition to free trade agreements. You have the floor.
On January 1st, 1994, NAFTA agreement, or the North America Free Trade Agreement, was put into effect in the American government. Since then, about 1 million people have lost their jobs. The reason then is that low-cost imports make it difficult for U.S. companies in those same industries to compete, cutting off workforce, leaving people jobless. Also, reducing tariffs on imports allow foreign companies to expand and hire workers. Many people are leaving the USA to work in foreign countries such as China and Mexico. In the future, NAFTA will create more job loss. It will also make factories close here in the U.S. in America, says the USAOnline.com. As a percentage of national income, the benefits from NAFTA have been greater in Canada and Mexico than the United States, because international trade represents a larger part in those economies. While the United States is the largest trading nation in the world, it has a very large and prosperous domestic economy. Therefore, international trade is a much smaller percentage of the U.S. economy than it is in many other countries with much smaller domestic economies. Which means that the United States is not getting the better end of the deal. Economist Robert Scott says he knows. He claims that over the last 20 years, trade and investment deals have increased U.S. trade deficits and cost Americans their jobs. For example, the agreement allowing China into the World Trade Organization led to trade deficiencies that eliminated 3.2 million jobs between 2001 and 2013. Meanwhile, the United States already faces a trade deficit with countries in the proposed Trans-Pacific Partnership that cost 2 million US jobs in 2015. For these reasons, I hope you agree with me that free trade is not in our nation's best interest.
Thank you both. The first question is for Ms. Breda. Mr. Gawkin argues that the free trade has led to jobs leaving the U.S. How would you respond to that?
I cannot deny that free trade has resulted in losing jobs, but those jobs have only been lost in the free trade industry. The jobs have been lost are replaced with jobs of a higher value. Harvard Magazine talks about how the new jobs were created in government and healthcare. Government and healthcare are areas where job employment wasn't necessarily that high. However, this situation will not remain like this. According to MarketWatch, in September, approximately 156,000 new jobs were created in healthcare and government areas. Not only that, but the government has said over the past 3 months, job gains have averaged out to be around 192,000. These numbers will only continue to increase and ensure that unemployment will no longer be as big of a problem in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Pareda. Mr. Gawkin, in her speech, Ms. Pareda states that free trade agreements offer the potential to form substantial environmental policy. How would you respond to that?
Obviously, I'm for environmental policies that will improve the quality of life on Earth. But I'm also not saying that we should not pursue trade relations with foreign nations. But I am saying, and historically it has been proven, that free trade agreements always end up hurting the U.S. economy. There are other forms which we can pursue environmental agreements with other nations. For instance, just last year, much progress we made at the Paris climate talks. Obviously, that isn't the final word on climate change or environmental policy. It does suggest that we can make progress and even lead the discussion on environmental policy without having to sign onto harmful free trade agreements.
Thank you both. Your 30-second speech now, Ms. Pareda.
Although Mr. Gawkin has made valid points on how things such as free trade can potentially hurt the U.S., it is time that free trade agreements aren't looked upon as a negative, but more of a positive. Not only do these arguments help to stabilize our economy and environment, but they also help to create higher value jobs. Nations in the international community have shown how committed they are to free trade agreements. At this point, we can use these agreements to help shape our country, or we can be left out. America cannot afford that cost.
Thank you. Your 30-second speech time is now, Mr. Gawkin.
Even though Ms. Pareda made very strong points on how free trade is good for the United States and the world, people are still losing their jobs because of it. Free trade has affected us in the past, the present, and the future. Free trade has been helping other countries, but historically ends up hurting the U.S. In the long run, people are going to lose many of their jobs from big companies cutting their workforce because of free trade. Free trade will not work with the United States of America, and that is why I hope you agree that free trade is not in America's best interest.
Okay. Our final debate is another foreign policy question. Should America continue to support NATO at its current level?
Mr. Mills, you are in favor of America continuing our current level of support for NATO. You have 2 minutes.
When it comes to our support in NATO, it is more than the United States. First, let's look at what NATO stands for. It is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The definition of a treaty is a formal agreement between 2 or more states in reference to peace, alliance, commerce, or other international relations, according to dictionary.com. The definition clearly states that a treaty is created to achieve peace. NATO was originally created to provide all-around support to stop the Soviet Union. In today's society, the Soviet Union no longer exists, but Russia is still a powerful, unpredictable, and very dangerous country with a strong military. The leader of Russia himself, Vladimir Putin, said, "We shall fight against them, throw them in prisons, and destroy them." This quote just blatantly states that Vladimir and the whole Russian society are nothing to play around with. Nearly 8,000 people have been killed in the Ukrainian conflict since April of 2014, said freebeacon.com. This event happened in 2014 on the coast of Ukraine.
Now Crimea is taken over by Russia. It is not only our moral obligation, but our national obligation to help those part of our alliance. We cannot simply abandon those that we are allied with. My opponent may bring up that the United States does not benefit from NATO, but FletcherForum.org says, as a global power, America desperately needs this shore of stability and economic prosperity on the side of the Atlantic is so close to a region with instability, such as the Middle East. This shows that NATO is not just about war. It opens up our economy to the other side of the world. Ms. Mehta may state that this is a waste of the United States' money, but NATO is an investment to reach global peace. Remember, NATO is an alliance. So if the United States ever runs into crisis involving war or Russian threats, we have 27 other members that are part of NATO to help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Ms. Mehta, you have 2 minutes to state your opposition for maintaining our current level of support for NATO. You have the floor.
The United States of America should withdraw support from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, otherwise known as NATO. We should not be in the business of pledging to send our brave soldiers to risk the last full measure of devotion to defend Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania from Russian aggression, or even Croatia and Albania from the Serbian attack. Our military sole duty is to defend the citizens of the United States who pay their salaries and owe allegiance to our country, which NATO countries do not. For that reason, the United States should invoke Article 13 of NATO to withdraw, states Bruce Fein, constitutional lawyer and author. NATO was created for the sole purpose of military protection towards Europe. NATO was created in 1949 with the United States as one of the 12 founding members, largely to provide collective security against expansionism by the Soviet Union. The alliance, which now has 28 members, aims to protect freedom and security of its members through political and military means. Cost sharing has been an issue, states Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, also claiming that all 28 members of NATO have pledged to spend at least 2% of their economy on defense, but only Britain, Greece, and the United States tend to do so. Tom Kircher, a reporter for PolitiFact, on April 1st, 2016, states that we certainly can't afford to do this anymore. NATO is costing us a fortune. The treaty is being economically unfair to us, states John J. Marsheimer. Training a critical eye on the current state of U.S. alliances, both in NATO and beyond, isn't simply a matter of fairness. It's about best allocating limited resources. The United States should be spending money at home. There are more important national and international issues in which the state's money should be going towards, such as counterterrorism, presidential elections, and debt. This country owes so much debt, we should be paying for that instead of maintaining this alliance. America should cut off their ties, as cost-sharing between countries is a huge issue, and the treaty is being unfair towards our country as an economy. For these reasons, NATO is indeed ineffective and an unwise investment of U.S. resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mills, in her remarks, Ms. Mehta states that NATO is ineffective and an unwise investment of U.S. resources. How would you respond to that?
Well, NATO is definitely something that the United States has to devote time and money to. There's no denying that. I see how Ms. Mehta could say that NATO could cause our soldiers to be sacrificed. But if we went into times of crisis because of Russian aggressions, other countries would give us troops. But if you look at why we invest in NATO, it is to help those who share similar values and create a powerful global alliance for peace. When NATO was created in 1949, there were only 12 countries. Today, in 2016, there are 28 countries part of NATO. This is showing that the United States' democratic values are being widespread more and more internationally. It only shows that this is a chance to shut down violent global threats. To answer your question, can we put a price on global peace? Sorry for speaking all my time.
Thank you. Ms. Mehta, in his speech, Mr. Mills cites that the information of NATO is to check Russian aggression. How would you propose we support countries like Ukraine without NATO?
Yes, I do agree that the point of NATO is to check on Russian aggression. And if and when America will leave NATO, other countries like Ukraine will need support from our country. The Ukrainian people have made tremendous sacrifices over the past 2 years, including more than 100 killed during the Maidan Revolution in 2014 and nearly 10,000 killed fending off Vladimir Putin's invading forces in eastern Ukraine. Ukrainians believe they have endured disappointment with their own leaders and frustration from the West, which Ukrainians believe has fallen short in providing their support our country needs. And that is why, after leaving NATO, America has ways to continue to support them. Sanctions against Russia will remain in place and will be increased over time, unless and until Russia withdraws its forces and weapons from them, respects Ukraine's sovereignty, and territorial integrity, and return to Ukraine the citizens it kidnapped during the Ukrainian territory, states David Kramer, and this is how we can continue to support Ukraine after leaving NATO. Therefore, it is in the best interest of our country to leave this treaty. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Mills, you have 30 seconds to summarize your arguments.
To conclude, the United States must continue its current support with NATO for 3 reasons. 1, it is not only our moral obligation, but our national obligation to help those that we are allied with, especially in times of crisis like Ukraine. 2nd, Russia is still a very strong and dangerous, unpredictable country. Therefore, we need help from other countries to stop their invasions and unpredictable behavior. And finally, there are 28 countries in NATO, including the United States. If the U.S. ever runs into dangerous conflict with Russia or other dangerous international affairs, we can rely on those 27 other countries that are part of the NATO alliance. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Mehta, you have 30 seconds to summarize your arguments.
We must discontinue our support from NATO because America cannot afford to pay for other countries. Cost sharing between countries has been an issue and can never be resolved, and the treaty is being extremely inequitable towards our country, our economically based country. America, along with Britain and Greece, are the only countries out of 28 who spend 2% of their economy on defense. Instead of protecting our own country through NATO, we are chaperoning Europe's instead with this nation's money. The United States has many expectations from other countries and money that needs to go to more practical causes, such as race relations, counterterrorism, the presidential elections, and other such things. To conclude, the USA doesn't need to support NATO anymore. Thank you. Sorry for the numbers. Thank you. Mr. Kane, you and Mr. Sobel have been busy verifying speeches all debate. Can you let us know how the debaters did?
All sources and information have been checked and verified to be true. Obviously, these numbers are open to interpretation, and that is why we debate. Back to you, Amanda.
Thanks for all your work, Mr. Kane and Mr. Sobel. And thanks to all of you for watching our debate. Hopefully, our debaters have caused you to think about issues that matter to our country.
Hopefully our debaters have demonstrated that debates can be more about exploring the truth of an issue instead of defeating an opponent. We urge you all to read up on the issue regardless of your age, and if you are old enough to vote, please do so. Thank you.